Welcome to episode 1 of Let's Talk, a web series covering social and cultural goings-on of our world. Today we're going to take a look at neutrality. I should preface this by saying that I am no expert in neutrality. This is just coming from my own personal beliefs. In some cases, neutrality can be a good thing, such as when your friends are arguing over where to eat or what to do. And you don't want to take sides because you don't want to make one of your friends mad, and honestly, you could care less where you go to eat or what you do. That sort of neutrality is fine. There's no harm coming to anybody when you stay neutral in that decision or decisions like that. However, recently we've been seeing people and organizations wanting to remain neutral in areas where it can be harmful to remain neutral. One place where we see neutrality being talked about a lot is in schools, especially when it comes to things such as the pride flag and Black Lives Matter. I think this is a very tricky place because public schools are expected not to push a certain agenda on their students. I would say I am perfectly fine with a school wanting to remain neutral on things such as wars and gun rights. However, when it comes to human rights, that is an instance and a time where it can be a detriment to students when a school remains neutral. Take, for instance, Black Lives Matter. It's been a big thing this past year in the wake of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and so many other black people being murdered, especially by police. I don't see anything wrong with teachers having Black Lives Matter stuff around their room. It's not saying that white lives don't matter, or that only black lives matter. It's simply saying that I stand with my African American brothers and sisters in their fight for racial justice. So I think it's a very bad thing that we see a lot of school corporations flat out telling their teachers that they cannot have Black Lives Matter stuff in their classrooms. Another example is the pride flag. This symbol has become synonymous with the LGBTQ+ movement. Recently, my school told 2 of its teachers to take down pride flags that they had in their classrooms because, from my knowledge, a parent called to our superintendent and complained. In my meeting with our superintendent as well as our principal, I have come to the understanding that they took it down because of wanting to remain viewpoint neutral. Basically, to sum it up, they are afraid that somebody is going to file a discrimination lawsuit against a school corporation because they are only showing one side in the argument of what marriage is. Yes, the pride flag is a symbol of the LGBTQ+ community, but it's not just that. It's also one of the clearest ways for straight allies to say, I love you, I support you, and you are worth it. The intent of teachers by flying the pride flag is not to say that heterosexuality is wrong. It's simply to say that our gay students matter. You can come to talk to me if you're having problems. I'm a safe space for you. That's something really important for LGBTQ+ students, especially here in Indiana, where we are notorious for how we treat gay people. I'm not going to go into that in this episode. I might cover that in another episode, but feel free to do research on that because here in Indiana, we do not have the best track record. One of the biggest fears of LGBTQ+ youth is being rejected for who they are. According to the Trevor Project in one of its national polls, 1 in 3 LGBTQ+ youth report that they have been physically threatened or harmed in their lifetime due to their sexual orientation and/or gender identity. That being said, it's not easy being gay in America, especially here in Indiana. Granted, we're not as bad as Alabama or Arkansas, but we're still bad. So having that safe spot in schools where they know they can go without the fear of rejection is so important to our mental health. In that same study, the Trevor Project stated that 40% of LGBTQ respondents seriously attempted committing suicide in the past 12 months. In the Trevor Project's 2021 survey on LGBTQ youth mental health, they found that LGBTQ youth who had access to spaces that affirmed their sexual orientation and gender identity reported lower rates of attempted suicide. That study also went on to say that transgender and non-binary youth attempt suicide less when respect is given to their pronouns, and they are allowed to officially change their legal documents. So having that safe space does have a positive impact on our mental health. The argument about remaining viewpoint neutral is so flimsy when it comes to the pride flag, because this flag is not an exclusive one, it's an inclusive one. The flag does not promote the hatred of straight or cis people. It promotes the love of everybody. I think that's a question that needs to be asked, is what does this symbol represent? Is it an inclusive or an exclusive one? And if it's an exclusive or hateful one, then it should not be allowed to be in classrooms. I think that another question that needs to be asked when it comes to this disallowment is, what message am I sending out? What message is this sending out? That's not a question that I have an answer to. That's a question that one has to ask of themselves. If I'm not allowing my teachers to fly pride flags, what message does that convey to the LGBTQ+ students? If I disallow my teachers from having Black Lives Matter stuff in their classroom, what message does that send to my African American students? And I think more and more school corporations need to be asking themselves, what message am I sending by disallowing this? Because it might not be your intent to push an anti-something agenda, but to an outsider, what message does that send? Neutrality in certain situations can be perfectly fine, but when you're talking about human rights, that is a time when you cannot be neutral and come out looking like a good guy. When it comes to human rights, you have to take a stand. Change never happens if there aren't people who are willing to push back and to do things that are uncomfortable and risky. I know that it is not the intent of the school corporation, but by forcing teachers to remove pride flags and by claiming neutrality, to an outsider it almost seems as though they are taking an anti-gay side. As Elie Wiesel once famously said, neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence only encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. His words are very true. By staying silent, you are basically giving a free pass to those who are doing bad things. I know that neutrality can be really hard, and figuring out if you're going to remain neutral or not on an issue can be extremely hard. But let's take a look at bullying for an example. In school, you are taught to never be a bystander. If you see someone getting bullied, go tell an adult. Because if you don't tell an adult, you're just as bad as the bully. Now our school corporation wants to be that bystander. They would much rather look on than do something difficult. What message does that send? In the great words of Desmond Tutu, it means a great deal to those who are oppressed to know that they are not alone. Never let anybody tell you what you're doing is insignificant. Until next time.